Hi guys, can you hear me? Yes, I'm so excited to be here with you. Yes, welcome, welcome. I want to just say a big thank you to all of you for being here today, for taking the time out of your day to come here and learn with us, have a little fun. We are just going to be teaching a little bit of tips and tricks, a little bit of techniques that'll help you really achieve better makeup application. So today's topic is going to be smoothing textured skin. And just to introduce myself, my name is Linda, and I am going to be your instructor today. I'm an LA-based makeup artist. I'm experienced in all styles, and I have worked with many different beauty brands, so I know that Il Makiage is a wonderful, wonderful brand. They are a tech-based company, and they've really revolutionized the makeup game by coming up with this test that is really great at finding the perfect match for your foundation. And their products are really top quality, really great stuff. And so I'm really excited to show you a little bit about what you can do and add to your routine, to your makeup routine every day to make the makeup look a little bit better. So I'm excited to get started. I'm gonna go over the products that we will be using today, and then I'm gonna go over a little bit about what we will be kind of targeting today. So we are going to help achieve a smoother skin texture on the skin, and we are also going to target any problem areas. And lastly, we are going to make skin look like skin, because at the end of the day, we all want that makeup to look very skin-like and to be very, a little bit more natural on the skin. And that can be very natural, or that could even be full coverage, but still have that natural appeal to it. So let's get started. So I'm gonna get started with Il Makiage No Filter Poreless Base Smoothing Primer. I'm gonna be using that first. And then I'm gonna be going in with the Fuck I'm Flawless Concealer. This is a multi-use perfecting concealer. I'm the shade 02, but I'm using one that's a little bit more highlighting to my skin. And then I'm gonna be using the Woke Up Like This foundation, Flawless Base Foundation, and mine's is in the shade 040. And lastly, I'm gonna be using the Hydrating Setting Spray. This is our holy grail. And those are the 4 products I'll be using today. So, and then I'll be answering questions as we go. And we are gonna answer a little bit more questions towards the end. Yes! Okay, so I am actually already prepped. I've just used a moisturizer on my skin. I have no makeup on. I do have my brows and then a little bit of a liner, but no foundation on my skin. I'm just prepped. So starting off with skincare, that's going to be super important when you are applying makeup. It's important that the skin is very hydrated, that the skin is plump, so that it receives the makeup well. So that is going to be super important, hydrating the skin. If you're more of an oily skin type, a gel-based, a water-based moisturizer works really well. If you're a little bit more dry, then something that's a little bit more moisture rich, that's a little bit richer, thicker, is going to be better for your skin. And if you're a combination, then something in between works really well. Even gel-based, water-based with a little bit of a punch. So that is gonna be number 1. Then comes primer. Primer is going to be really important for certain areas of the skin. You have your primers that are going to be great for mattifying your skin. You have your primers that are going to be great for filling in any pores or smoothing out any texture. The Il Makiage primer is wonderful because it is going to fill in any pores and it's gonna smooth out any texture. It's very hydrating, but at the same time, it's going to be oil controlling. So it's gonna control any shine on the face, any areas on the face, and it's very lightweight. It's gonna pretty much be like a velvet finish. And this is a clear primer, and it's really wonderful because it's lightweight. It doesn't really feel heavy on the skin. And I'm just applying some on my hand, on the back of my hand. And I'm gonna pick it up with my finger and I'm gonna start applying this on the areas that I have any texture, that I want to remove any shine on the skin. So just in the forehead, I like to remove a little bit of shine, on the chin area. And then while I'm doing that, I love how you guys are engaging. And it's very, very lightweight. It feels very light, but it really packs that punch. It really smooths out any texture on the skin. I'm applying in this area where I have a little bit of pore action. And then any areas that you want to cut any shine. What's great about this primer is that it's knocking all these different areas at once. It's helping minimize any shine in the face. It's also helping fill in any pores. It's helping smooth any texture on the skin. If there's any acne on the skin, if there's any texture on the skin, any bumps on the skin, then this is really great at smoothing it out. You want to just be very gentle when you're applying this as well, because we don't want to exacerbate the skin. We don't want to irritate the skin or stress the skin even more. So that's going to be very important. So after I've applied that in the areas where I most want it, I'm going to go in with a little trick. So instead of going in with foundation first, we're gonna go in with concealer first. And the reason why is that concealer usually packs a little bit more of a punch. What we're gonna use the concealer for is going to be any areas that you have a little bit more, that you need that extra punch, you know? Any areas where you want a little bit more coverage, you're gonna apply it to those areas. We're also going to use this concealer as a highlighting concealer. And this is a multi-use concealer that you can use as a contour if you get something that's a shade or two darker than your own complexion, or you can use it as a highlighting concealer if it's a few shades lighter than your complexion, or even using something that's very close to your tone. And it's very lightweight. It's really nice. I really, really love this concealer. It's very long lasting, and it's gonna be very a natural matte finish. So this is gonna be great for acneic skin, because sometimes in those areas, they can be a little bit more drier. And so you don't want to put too many layers on it. You don't want to put too much powder on it. So because this concealer is going to be a natural matte, it's going to dry down. So you don't have to use as much powder. It's not really necessary. And I'm going to try to kind of go through this without using as much powder. But if for people who are a little bit more oily on the skin, it is going to be necessary. So you will alter it to your own makeup routine, to your own skin type. And that's going to be very important. I always like to say there are rules in makeup, but if it looks good on you, you can break it. So we're going to go into this concealer, and we're going to use it on any areas that we have trouble areas. And then we are going to go into any areas that we want to also highlight. So I'm going to go under my eye, and I'm just going in this little triangle area. And if your skin is a little bit more drier, then you want to work a little bit faster with this concealer, because it does dry down. If your skin is a little bit more oily, then you can definitely take your time a little bit more. But I'm gonna go straight in with my finger. I love using my finger to kind of blend this concealer out. It's really, really lightweight, and I like to tap at the skin. This is very important. You don't want to pull at the skin, because then you're removing coverage. You're kind of diffusing that concealer. So I'm putting that all through this area. Do not worry if any other areas aren't blended out, because we're gonna come back in with the foundation, and that's the little trick. What we want to do is create, because when we have textured skin, you don't want to put too many layers, or it just looks too heavy. So what you want to kind of create are thinner layers, or as less layers as you can, the least amount of layers that you can do is better for the skin. So instead of using 2 very heavy layers, we're gonna go in with the concealer to target any areas that we want that extra punch. And then we're gonna go in with the foundation, starting off on the areas where we haven't used any concealer, and then merging it into the concealer so that it looks it makes the eye think that the skin is very fresh, and it's also smoother on the skin. So I went in under the eyes. Now I'm gonna go into any areas where I want to target that I have any discoloration, that I have any blemishes, any areas that I want a little bit extra coverage. So I like a little extra coverage in this area because I'm usually a little bit darker in this area. I like a little bit of coverage on any areas that you have any blemishes. So I have a little bit of a discoloration in that area. And then I'm going to go in with my, now a sponge really works well. Sometimes it depends on the skin, but a brush can really, if you're dealing with very acneic skin, sometimes it's best to use a sponge. And the Il Makiage site has a wonderful, wonderful sponge. You want to wet it before using it, then wring out the water. Just make sure it's just a little bit of damp. And then you're gonna use it on the skin in a tapping motion. Kind of like little punches to the face, like just little, really, really soft, really, really soft. We don't want to, again, pull at the skin because then we are just creating more friction. Okay. And now, when we're dealing with any pimples, so this is a secret trick. When we're dealing with any pimples, a secret trick is when you apply that concealer, apply it directly on that area where you have that redness, where you have that pimple. And you're gonna leave it on for a second. You want it to kind of slightly begin to dry because I want that punch of coverage right in that center. When I come back to this, all I'm gonna do is I'm merely going to blend out the edges. This is a little trick. And what this does is in the center, we have that punch of coverage, and on the end, we have a little bit more. So I'm gonna have to apply a touch more. It didn't dry in time. So I'm gonna leave it a little bit longer, and I'm gonna come back to it and blend, blend, blend. So let's go through this a little bit while this kind of dries down. For the under eye area, when you're dealing with any heavy lines, when you're dealing with any texture in the skin, it's important to take a lighter approach. That is going to help. The beautiful thing about the Il Makiage makeup is that it's very, very, very lightweight. So it's going to be really nice at filling in any texture, but it's still going to be very light on the skin. So that's what I really love. And this concealer, it packs a punch, but it's very, very lightweight. So that is, and then using very minimal powder sometimes helps as well, depending, because if the areas in your skin are more oily, then I do recommend using a powder. A translucent powder works really well. Il Makiage has a translucent loose powder, and it pretty much is just going to set the skin. It's not going to add any coverage. It's just merely going to set the skin. But it's very lightweight as well. It's not going to look cakey on the skin. And I'm using a concealer that is a few shades lighter than my skin. But when you're dealing with any areas that discoloration or acne, you can use something, and what will work a little bit better is something that's a little bit closer to your natural skin tone. Sometimes if you're dealing with discoloration, a concealer that has a peach undertone to it, depending on the level of on the spectrum of your skin tone, then you're going to decide if you're going to use something that has a little bit of a lighter peach or something that has a little bit of a richer peach. And the great thing about the Il Makiage site is that, you're able to see the undertone of each of the products, whether it's the concealer or whether it's the foundation. So it's really, really great. So now I'm going to come back into this area, and I'm actually going to use I'm gonna be very, very light. If your finger is too filled with moisture, then this is not gonna blend as well. So it can't be too wet, but it just has to slightly. So I'm just blending out the edges. I want that middle portion to pack that punch. And it's okay if it's not completely blended because I'm gonna go back in with my foundation. And that's the beauty of that. So, all right, so now we're gonna go in with the foundation. And it's very important that you remember exactly where you're placing certain stuff. So when we're layering on the skin, you don't wanna go in with a brush and come in and disrupt what we've carefully layered. So anything like this, I wouldn't necessarily go in with a brush. Instead, I would use a sponge. A sponge is gonna work better. If there's no texture in the skin, then I will go in with a brush, but always at the end, I love to use a sponge just to help smooth out the area a little bit more. So I'm gonna go in with a sponge and I'm gonna use the foundation. And so I'm gonna go in with, my shade is 040. And the test was just amazing because it matched me exactly. And I was honestly shocked because, you know, we're not in person and it's a test online, and it was amazing. So it's very, 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 it's pretty much my exact match. So I'm just grabbing some on the back of my hands, and then I'm gonna grab with a sponge little by little. I don't wanna pick this up all at once because then I'm gonna create an uneven application all over the face. So I'm going to start off with the foundation on the areas where I haven't applied any concealer. I'm going to go in. And again, you want to use that tapping motion. Whenever I'm dealing with any texture, I want to make sure that I'm pressing the product into the skin, creating the least amount of texture. So I'm going into this area, and this is a very light foundation. And that's why I say, you know, when you're using your concealer, that's when you're gonna use it on the areas where you require a little bit more of that pack of punch. And so I used a little bit of that concealer in that area. So I'm going in, and just what I have left, I picked up a little bit, but not too much. I'm going over that concealer very, very lightly. Same thing here, what I have left on the sponge, I'm slightly blending that into my concealer area. So anytime you're approaching any area that you've already used your concealer, you're approaching it very carefully. You're just making sure you're just slightly covering it with a very small filter of that foundation. And again, we don't want to use that streaking motion on any areas that we've carefully placed product, because then we just ruin exactly what we worked hard at the beginning for. So I'm going to go into the next part of my skin, starting off on the areas where I didn't have any concealer and merging that into the areas that you do have your concealer, what you have left on that. It's super important that you're gentle when you're with your skin, especially if you're dealing with acneic skin. You want to be gentle on the skin. So that's why using a brush sometimes on those areas, it can stress the skin a little bit more. You can definitely use it on the areas that you don't have texture or where we aren't layering different products. But on areas that we do have texture, you want to just be a little bit more careful. And again, we're using the very, very soft tapping motion. It's like a massage to your face. And then we're going into the rest of the skin. And then I'm reading a little bit as I'm applying. So with these sponges, because I've applied water to it, the water kind of holds it up. So the product is not really seeping into the sponge. When you're using it dry, it is soaking up all of the product. So it's very important that you dampen the sponge a little bit. It's super, super important. It also kind of really melts it a little bit better into the skin, and it's a little bit more soothing to the skin. So that was a great, great question. Sorry, I just saw that as I was scrolling through. I love the engagement, guys. And when we're talking, you know, sometimes with acneic skin, it could either be very drying or it could either be overly oily. So it's important to remember that for either one, it's super important to hydrate the skin. If the skin is not hydrated, the dry skin is going to be drier, and the oily skin is actually going to produce more oils. And the reason why is because when you cut any hydration from the skin, let's say you're using stuff that is not equally hydrating. So the Il Makiage makeup, even though it is going to be more of a natural matte finish, it still has products in there, ingredients in there that are going to be hydrating for the skin. So it's a good balance of it. When you're using stuff that is way too drying for the skin, then you're telling the skin there's no more oil, there's no more hydration, and the skin begins to make even more oils. So it's super important to hydrate the skin. That's the number one thing when you're doing your foundation, when you're doing any type of makeup. And that's why at the very end, when we come in with our hydrating setting spray, that is going to be kind of our go-to for creating more of that hydration in the skin and making it look a little bit more skin-like. So that was a great question as well. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to finish up the rest of the skin. I love the engagement, guys. And we're going to answer more questions at the end, so do not worry. And we still have a few more tips and tricks. So I'm just going back in with my sponge. I'm reinforcing any areas. I'm going in, I'm blending a little bit more. Blending down into the neckline is super, super important. And if you're going to be pulling a little bit, it's totally fine if it's done very softly, just to blend. You don't want to tug too much at the skin. And on any areas that need a little bit extra love, you can always go in with a little bit more foundation and just hit it in that area. The great thing about this foundation is that it's a natural matte. So it's going to dry down. So for oily skin, this is going to be perfect because it's going to help control oil throughout the day. And you're going to have to use less powder. And then for drier skin, this is perfect because you don't have to use any powder. I'm a little bit more of a drier skin type. So when I'm using this foundation, I don't have to use any powder. If I want to use any powder, I definitely do a little bit under the eyes. And I'll use the loose setting translucent powder. I'll use that a little bit under the eyes and then a little bit on any areas that I get a little more oily. So now we're coming back into this area right here. And I'm gonna make sure that because it hasn't covered completely, I'm going in with a touch more foundation because I need a little bit more coverage. And then I'm going to go in and very, very gently, we're going to begin to create a little layer there. Let's see. And you know, I'm using concealer before the foundation, but it's not always, you know, you don't always have to do it that way. You can totally do it the other way around. I just feel like it's easier to blend sometimes when you do it this way, but it's whatever process works best for you. It's all about just getting little things here and there that's going to help just make that process a little bit easier, to make you feel more confident approaching it, because there's so many trends, there's so many, you know, different ways that you can do it, diagrams, everything, but you have to remember that you are very unique in your own way, and that is what Il Makiage they're all about, empowering and uplifting your most like individual self and unique self. So everybody has a different face shape, everybody everybody has a different tone. Everybody has different things that they love about their face. So always remembering that, and just, you know, taking it, you know, little things that you can grab from different areas that you can add to your makeup routine that's going to make it a little bit better. So now we've kind of gone into that area and really, really helped kind of cover that blemish. And you kind of have to be very gentle in that area, because if you're moving too fast and you don't let the product dry a little bit down, then you can remove the product instead of allowing it to stay on the blemish area. All right. And I use my hands. I love using my hands, but you can use a brush. In this case, when we're dealing with acneic skin, with any texture in the skin, I prefer using a sponge. So because that is going to press it into the skin very lightly, you're not going to create more texture. And if we're layering different stuff, if I'm layering that concealer and then I'm going in with my foundation, I don't want to go in with a brush and kind of disrupt that, because then it's pointless for me to do it at the beginning. I want to then go in with the sponge and instead just apply a little bit of a filter over that concealer. And so what it does, when the eye looks at the face, it says, oh my gosh, the face looks very fresh, it looks very bright. But in reality, what we did is we just added coverage on certain areas of our face, and then the rest of the skin is a little bit lighter. So that is the trick there. Instead of creating heavy layers, we're creating lighter layers. And somebody said, I use an SPF 30 as my base. What do you think of the hydration for my skin under the primer? It's important that even if you are using an SPF, you want to still use a moisturizer that's going to hydrate the skin, because sometimes the SPFs don't have enough of that moisture and hydration for the skin. All right, so next up, we're going to go in and we're going to go into, one second. Okay, I'm gonna get to your questions. Yeah, so many good questions, so many good questions. So next up, we're going to go into the, this part is going to depend on the type of skin that you have. So if you have more oily skin, then you would do a little bit of powder on any areas that you are experiencing extra shine. So usually the T-zone area is an area that we all experience a little bit of shine. I love to do a little bit of powder under the eyes as well. Right now, I'm not feeling like I need any powder. My skin is a little bit more drier. So if your skin is more drier, then you don't have to necessarily use powder, because the foundation really dries down to a natural matte finish. But if you're more oily, then I do definitely recommend a little bit of powder. A translucent loose powder really works well at setting the makeup. And then if you want a little bit extra coverage, you can use a foundation powder as well. But I always go in with a translucent powder first, just to ensure that everything is set and in place, and it's just going to make it a little bit more long lasting. But lastly, we are going to go into the hydrating setting spray. So this guy is awesome, 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 because it's really, really going to hydrate the skin. But people who are oily, do not run away, because this is still for you as well. At the same time that it's hydrating the skin, it's helping control any oil in the skin. So it's really, really going to be very hydrating, but also controlling any oils in the skin. This is what's going to make the skin look more skin-like. When you're using powder on the skin, sometimes it leaves that very cakey effect. If you're dealing with textured skin, sometimes if the acne or the area that is textured is a little bit dry, then if you put powder on top, it can look a little bit cakey. Something that is really a great quick fix to that is going to be your setting spray. Applying this in that area is going to help it kind of melt it into the skin, so that instead of looking powdery, it's going to look more skin-like. You want to make sure that whenever you're applying the spray, you're not applying it very closely, because then you are going to kind of splatter that and it creates a little bit of a mess. You want to make sure that you're, arm's length away from the face. I always like to get every area of the face. So if you felt it everywhere on the face, you are good. I'm gonna go in. I kind of like to do an X, and it just depends on the day. I'll do something different, but I'm just gonna go in and I like to go in. I like to kind of drench the face because I like to just look very, very hydrated. And then I go in and we're gonna fan that out. You can use a little fan as well. And then I'm gonna go in for a second layer. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm gonna go in for a second layer because what this is going to do is it's not only hydrating the skin, it's not only helping with, the oil production in the skin, it's also going to help so that the foundation is going to be long lasting. It's gonna be anti-fade, it's gonna be anti-crack. So it's not gonna move throughout the day pretty much. So this is great for people with dry skin. This is great for people with oily skin. This is great for people with combination skin. And this is a staple that I will always do at the end of every makeup, always setting the skin. And the great thing about this is that it's hydrating. So it's doing a little bit of everything all at once. And I'm gonna go in with a second layer. And just go in. Ooh, my earring is falling. She was trying to get away from me. I'm going in. And that's pretty much some of the best techniques that I've learned, from, the great artists that I've learned from, and how to help minimize texture and pores in the skin. The great thing about the, just recapping on it, the primer is that it's gonna help fill in any pores. It's going to help smooth out any texture. It's going to be hydrating to the skin at the same time that it's cutting any shine on the skin. It's also going to help make your makeup last longer. So it's just like a makeup grabber that's going to help ensure that it's very, very long lasting. And, I just love this stuff. It's really, really nice and lightweight. It doesn't feel heavy on the skin. After I used my primer, I went in with the concealer, the Fuck I'm Flawless concealer, multi-use. Again, you can use this, as you can see, I've been using it. You can use this under the eyes to help brighten. If you're using something that's a few shades lighter, then you're using it to brighten the skin. If you're using it on any areas that are blemishes, then you're using something that's going to be a little bit closer to your skin tone. And then if you're using it for contouring, then you're going to use something that's a few shades darker than your skin tone. And this is multi-use. It's very lightweight. So that's why you're able to use it to highlight, to contour. You're able to use it on blemishes, on any areas that have discoloration. And when you're dealing with discoloration, sometimes you have to go into a little bit of a corrector. And the great thing about these concealers is that they have an undertone. So if they have something that's an undertone that's a little bit peachier, then it helps with any areas that are a little bit more brown or gray. It really helps neutralize those areas and cover those areas very well, as opposed to using something that's going to be a little bit too light. Sometimes a concealer that's a little bit too light won't do the kind of work of covering. You have to kind of use something that's a little bit closer to the skin tone. So that is kind of the difference. So let's go over some of these questions because I'm excited. Okay, I'm excited to see what you guys thought. What do you guys think about these tips and tricks? Do you think that it's something that you can incorporate into your makeup routine? Was it something new that you learned? So let's see. So just how I see some questions about dark circles under the eyes. So the great thing about this concealer, again, it's gonna dry down to kind of a natural matte finish, a demi matte finish. So you don't have to use as much powder. When I'm using this concealer, I don't really use powder. If I'm very, very honest, because I'm more of a dry skin type. If you're more of an oily skin type, then I recommend definitely using powder. I'm a little bit more dry and my under eye is a little bit more dry, so I don't use any powder. But if you're using a little bit of powder, just a little dusting of powder is totally fine. We don't have to use a lot of powder. A little bit goes a long way. And that's what's gonna prevent less creasing. Sometimes when the skin is too wet in that area where we have a lot of movement, then that also makes it crease. So you have to powder that area. Sometimes you do have to powder that area. Sometimes in the smile lines, Because this foundation is very lightweight, I don't even powder my smile lines as well. But if you have a problem with smile lines, then you can do a little bit of powder in that area as well. It's gonna really help just set it into place and dry out that area so that there's no creasing happening. So I hope that was helpful for that. Let's see. So hyperpigmentation and dark circle, that goes back to our color correcting. And the beautiful thing about the concealers is that they have that undertone. You could see the undertone of the concealers and really choose one that's going to be, and the test does a great job as well, but you can also choose different ones that you can use for highlighting, contouring, or some that have a little bit of a peachier tone to it to help with any hyperpigmentation, any under eye darkness. And it depends. If you're lighter in skin tone, then you're going to use something that's going to be a little bit more pink, a little bit of a lighter pink. We're moving down into the spectrum. We're going to have to use something that's a little bit more peachy and then a little bit more orangey. And so that's going to be very important when you're, using any other concealers on the face, when you're dealing with any hyperpigmentation or under eye darkness. When we're dealing with under eye darkness, you want to make sure that you're not using a concealer that's a little bit too light, because then it can emphasize that a little bit more. You want to use something that's a little bit closer to your natural tone. And if you didn't get your exact skin tone match, I saw a comment about that. Il Maquillage is wonderful, wonderful. You could take it back in and then choose the correct one for you. They will really help you out in choosing it. So don't feel discouraged if it's not your perfect match. Sometimes it just means you're extra special. So you just have to, maybe the tone was off, or maybe it's a few shades up that you have to do, or a few shades darker. It's usually leaving you very, very close to where you should be. So if it's not the exact match, don't be discouraged. We are here to help you. But it is a wonderful foundation. And even though it is that natural matte, it's great for all skin tones. I really, really love it. Yes, you can use illuminating drops and add this to your foundation if you would like, so that your foundation is a little bit more luminous, that it's gonna have a little bit more of a glow to it. For dry skin, this is wonderful at kind of mimicking that hydrated, very plump skin. If you have texture in the skin though, I recommend that you don't use anything that's too highlighting in that area, because anything like that is going to, look at my next one, she is trying to run away too. Anything like that is going to kind of highlight that area. So you want to stick to stuff that is matte and only use highlight where you absolutely must. But if you don't have a lot of texture in the skin and it's more discoloration, then you could totally use some illuminating drops and add that in there. Using a brush, you want to be very gentle. If you're using something that's compact, you want to make sure that you're also doing that stamping motion and slightly going in circles, circular motion. And when you're holding the brush, you want to make sure that you're holding it more towards the end, so that you're doing a lighter touch on the face. You don't want to be too harsh on the face and be too hard when you're blending any of that foundation. And the concealer, somebody asked, what's the concealer again? It is the Fucking Flawless Multi-Use Perfecting Concealer. I have the shade 02, and it's probably a few shades lighter because I just like it more for highlighting. Yes, we are all unique. Exactly. That's why, there's not one thing fits all, especially in makeup. It's like everybody is unique in their own way, and they are going to, some people like more natural coverage, some people like more full coverage, some people like more of a fiercer eye, some people like a fiercer lip, and it's all up to you. As long as it makes you look beautiful, it makes you feel confident, then break the rules, it's totally fine. Let's see. Correcting blemishes, you can either do that before the foundation, or you can do that after the foundation. After you see if the foundation hasn't covered enough, then you could go in with the concealer, but it's going to have to be a concealer that's very close to your natural tone. If you're doing it before, it could be something that's a little bit lighter or darker, as long as it has that punch of coverage. So there's this not the right way to do it necessarily. There's no right way. It's just different processes that's going to get you to a different or same result. But you can always take little things, little tips that'll help you with your process. And yes, and the great thing about this concealer, it instantly reduces the appearance of under eye circles. It's built in with that undertone. So that is the beauty, that it's kind of like 2-in-1. That's what I love about their whole line. It's very, very great products. I'm excited. Yes. If I find I have a question, I find that with my combo skin, if I use an SPF, it makes more oil and I feel I look more oily. If and those areas you notice a little bit more shine, then you can definitely use a little bit more powder in that area, and then you don't have to use as much on the rest of the skin where you're dry. I always say, if you don't need to use a powder, you don't have to use it. And then even with the primer, it's not necessary for you to put the primer all over the face. You can use it only in the areas where you really need it. So any areas you want to cut shine, any areas you want to minimize texture, any areas that you want to fill in any pore. So if that's only one area of the skin, that's totally fine. You can apply it there, and the rest of the skin is pretty normal. So then the foundation is going to sit on it, and on this area it's still going to look natural, and on this area it's going to look natural as well. There's not going to be a difference. For somebody with really deep under eye circles, I wouldn't go with a concealer that is very highlighting, because that is going to make it look a little bit, it makes it look a little worse. So it's very important to use something that's a little bit closer to your skin tone and that has that undertone that is helping correct and neutralize the under eye darkness. Moisturizer usually goes first, and SPF usually goes last before going into primer. Someone who has dry skin, what are your thoughts on powder over the cheeks if you use powder, blush, highlight? If you have drier skin, you can always opt for, a little trick that I always like to do, and I've been sharing this with everybody that I've been talking to, is I love using the Il Makiage, their lip stain, their long wear matte lip cream, Infinity. And this is in the color Matcha Lust, but I love using this as a little bit of a blush. I'll put some on the back of my hand and I'll apply this on the apples of my cheek. And it's great because it's gonna dry down, but I don't have to use any powder. This is for my dry gals. You don't have to use too much powder. So that's kind of a way that you can use blush. You can use also, let's see. So I hope that kind of answered that. You don't always have to use powder. You can use different things. All right. Should you use setting powder and setting spray? Yes, you can totally. If you're not using any setting powder, you can you most definitely need to use the spray. If you're using setting powder, then definitely I still use the spray. And reason why is because even though you've gone in with that powder, if the skin looks a little bit cakey or looks a little bit dry, you're adding back that hydration, but you're also sealing everything in. So whatever the case may be, whether you're wearing or you're not wearing any powder, the sealing needs to happen so that this stays put throughout the rest of the day. Sometimes for more of the our more oily gals, the powder works great at cutting any shine and controlling the oil throughout the day. But you need a little bit of the hydration still, and you need that sealing. So that's when this guy comes in, the hydrating setting spray. So that was a really, really great question. I always do both. You would apply translucent powder with a brush, and you just want to slightly, you can apply it and just slightly dust it off. And you want to just be very, very gentle with your touch. And yes, the product is, oil controlling. It's actually enriched with chamomile, cucumber extracts, vitamin E that is really, really nourishing to the skin, green tea and golden marigold extract that's soothing for the skin as well. So really, really great ingredients at the same time that it's also setting your makeup. So you're doing, again, two in one. All right, I'm going through the questions. You guys are so amazing. Yes, the 2 layers of setting spray. Okay, so I have a question that says, I live in California. Yeah, so do I. With heat, does 2 layers of setting spray help with melting throughout the day? I say yes. That's why I said let's add those 2 layers, but you have to make sure to let it dry in between. So I will definitely add 2 layers. Sometimes I add more than 2 layers. And that is totally okay as long as you let it dry in between. It really just seals it in because it makes it anti-crack and anti-fade. So it really helps with any transferring as well. That was a great, great question. If the finishing powder, translucent powder, is making you look white in photos, you're using too much of it. You want to be very, very light with it. Normally, when I'm using the spray, this is a good question. The spray, it's final makeup. It exclude eyelashes or include eyelashes. So usually, I'm just wearing a little bit of mascara on my eyelashes, so I'm fine. If I'm using any, if I'm applying lashes, I'll usually cover the eyes and I'll spray this around the face, or I'll use it prior to applying the lashes if I'm applying the eyelashes at the very end. Yes, the primer has a very luxurious feel. It's such a nice primer. It feels really, really lightweight. And that's what I love about the makeup, is that it's very, very lightweight. It's never gonna feel heavy on the skin, and it blends so easily into the skin. Bronzer is added after the primer. So primer goes first, then either your concealer or foundation, whichever order you like to do it. And then you would add, oh, so this is very important as well. You're going in with primer first, then we're going in with our foundation. If we're using powder foundation, then we're sticking with that. If we're using a liquid foundation, and then you want to make sure that you set it before you go into any other powders like blush or bronzer. Because if you don't set it, then the bronzer and the blush catches onto any wet areas. So it's super, super important that you set it. And the loose translucent powder is really great at just setting the makeup. So then after, you could go in with your bronzer and you could go in with your blusher. And something very important, when you're going into that blusher or bronzer, be very carefully, especially if you've layered different things. You don't want to go in with the brush and really go in there really harshly. You kind of want to do a little bit of that tapping and slightly doing very gentle blending out. But the tapping motion really works really well if you have your brush that's a little bit more dome-like, and then just slightly blending. But after you've set it, you could really blend as long as you're doing it very, very lightly. Darker concealer for contouring, yes, you can do that. It's very lightweight. It's great for contouring. It's going to be very long lasting. I love using it for contouring as well. Let's see. Makeup transfer. This spray is going to be really good for that because it's anti-fade. So it's not going to fade. It's going to really seal it in. But sometimes I like to do a little bit of that translucent powder, and then I do that spray. Yes, I'm glad this was helpful. Yes. Doubling up on setting spray is what I do to stay matte during Carnival in Jamaica. Yes, exactly. It's a very helpful. And again, this one is oil controlling, but still it's going to be hydrating for the skin. So great for dry skin, oily skin, combination skin, all skin. So with oily skin, yes, I would use both powder and foundation. A little bit of powder on areas that you need it, but the great thing about this foundation is that you don't have to use as much powder. Yes, I'm glad you guys enjoyed. And if ever the sponge kind of gets a little bit drier, you can also always use just a little spritz of it just to kind of get it back into action, you know. So also remember that, just kind of reviewing that, the concealer on the areas that are the concealer is great for the areas where you want that pack of coverage, that punch of coverage. You really want a little bit more. We're going in with the concealer first, and then we're going in with our foundation to really merge everything together. Yes, try it with the sponge, you know, switch it out and see if with the sponge it works a little bit better. If it does the trick, sometimes that helps with really smoothing the skin and making the makeup really settle into the skin and look a little bit smoother. But it's that combo of that primer with the foundation. Yes. Yes. Somebody said I feel more confident at applying it myself. That is what I want to do, to make sure that you guys feel more confident. Sometimes you just need these little tips and tricks that you didn't know to make everything a little bit easier. And I love that I could share this with you guys. If you're doing contouring a few shades darker, 1 or 2 shades darker, depending on the intensity that you want and how well you know how to blend. Because blending is key. Yes. I'm glad you guys enjoyed. Okay, so we are nearing the end of our class. Let me get through this just to make sure there aren't any other questions that I haven't gotten to. Color correcting is going to be to neutralize any areas that have a different color than your skin tone. So any areas that are more red, any areas that are discolored through hyperpigmentation, sun damage, anything like that. Color correcting helps neutralize so that when you put that foundation on top, it doesn't shoot through gray, or it doesn't shoot through, you can't see it through the foundation. And contouring helps kind of create a little bit more structure in the face, a little bit more fierceness. I do recommend a damp sponge when applying foundation. Just make sure that it's not wet. You just want it to be slightly damp. Oh, and if there's any acne on the skin and it's a little bit red, anything with a yellow undertone really helps at neutralizing, or sometimes when it comes back to that color correcting, that green helps with neutralizing, but you have to be very careful because it can show up through the makeup and then it doesn't look good. Okay, so we are nearing the end. I wish I could stay with you guys forever, but I got to go. But I hope that you guys enjoyed this class. I hope that, you really learned a little bit of everything, that you feel a little bit more confident. I really want to thank you guys for being here today, for taking the time out of your day. It really means a lot. And it's really great that we were able to share and engage. And I'm just going in, just making sure I didn't miss anything. I don't want to leave without missing anything. Okay, so yes. So thank you guys. I love you guys. Thank you for being here today. Look out for a special email from Il Maquillage. They are sending something your way. But just another big thank you for being here today, for taking the time out of your day to come here and learn. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and that you feel more confident after today's lesson on how to apply makeup, how to make your skin look a little bit more smoother, how to be a little bit more fiercer, and just, a reminder that you guys are all unique, you guys are all beautiful, and just always remember that. So thank you guys. I'll see you guys.